Good afternoon, everyone. I hope that everyone is well and can hear me. I am going to call this meeting, public school board meeting, to order. And just bear with me for just a moment. Okay, and as is customary, we always begin our meetings with an invocation, the Pledge of Allegiance, and a mission statement. At this time, Mr. Weisiger will lead us in the invocation.
It'll be my pleasure too. God, we come before you tonight, as always, thankful that we have the honor of bringing our concerns, our requests, and our petitions before you. We thank you that we have the freedom in this country to gather together to deliberate the important decisions on behalf of the constituents, in this case of Osceola County. I thank you for a board that loves students, loves this community, and cares about doing the right thing, and the value that I see in being able to work with them every day. God, we pray for your continued wisdom, that we will continue to make decisions that are in the best interest of those that we serve and those we represent. We thank you for the dedicated staff of this district that works tirelessly to ensure that education is happening in all levels, all days, and in all ways. And we pray for continued health for our community members, for our nation at large, and for those around the globe that are trying to navigate, overcome, and deal with this pandemic. God, we pray for your wisdom for doctors that seek vaccines, that seek opportunity to bring healing to those that are in pain. And we pray, as always, for unity, not just for us as a board, not just for us as a community, but certainly for us as a nation, that we might come together and always recognize every life has significant value and every person is valued and cherished. It's in Christ's name that I pray. Amen.
Thank you, Mr. Weisiger. And at this time, I'll call on Mr. Thacker to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Mr. Thacker. Ms. Castillo, would you do the honor just for?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Castillo. And would you please announce our mission statement?
Of course. Our mission statement is inspiring all learners to reach their highest potential as responsible, productive citizens.
Thank you, Ms. Castillo. So we're coming to the point where the school board members take an opportunity to announce any positive comments or anything that they want to announce. I'll start with you, Ms. Castillo. Is there anything?
Yeah, so in the past few weeks, I've had the opportunity to speak with a lot of our parents, our teachers, and our students regarding some of their concerns. And I just want to thank them publicly for trusting me and reaching out, picking up the phone and calling me or emailing me with regards to what their questions or comments, their concerns are. I am privileged to be able to serve on this board, and I want them to know that I do not take this lightly, and I'm just glad to have been available to be a sounding board for them during these past few weeks.
Very well stated, Ms. Castillo. Thank you, Mr. Weisiger.
Thank you. I'll just again offer thanks to, I see our superintendent on screen, but I know that there is a ton of staff across this district that's also logged into this meeting. I just want to say thank you to you guys. I was just reading a card that someone had sent me as a personal thanks, and what it reminds me of is the thanks that I get to offer to each and every one of you for who you are and the investment that you make. And as we've dealt with the impacts of COVID-19, the that need to be made as we oversee this important institution in our community, I find great relief and optimism in knowing that I get to work with dedicated professionals like you guys that I know every single day wake up and choose to do this work because you care about this community, you care about our kids, you care about one another, and you care about the team that works together every day to deliver excellence on behalf of the constituents of Osceola County. So my thank you goes out to our superintendent, and every member of our staff in every department that chooses to invest in the work we do every day. I truly, truly, truly appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Mr. Weissier. I'll go next. I just want to express to everyone that there's been a lot of careful attention, a lot of hard work, a lot of analysis and considerations to get to the point of where we're at. I am extremely proud of this school district and of this board and of this community because there was just so much input from so many people to help us confront what is perhaps the most difficult professional task that I've ever been involved with. Once we go into the details later on during this the school board meeting, I hope that it'll become a lot clearer to the members of our community, an understanding of A, what we have to face, B, what we want to accomplish, and C, the decisions and how we got there. Again, I will note that we need to remain open-minded. We need to be educated. We need to be appraised. We need to consider um, um, facts more than anything in order to deal with the challenge that we have. And I hope that this school board meeting and will begin the process of transparency and explaining to the community of how we plan to move forward, and that we will always be addressing and taking into consideration more knowledge, more guidance as it becomes available, always because we want what's best for our students, our teachers, and our community. I'll go to the next school board member. I'll call him Mr. Ricky Booth. If you could hear me, Ricky?
Yep. Can you hear me, Chairman Soto?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you and Mr. Weissier said a lot of things that I 100% agree with. And I also would just like to add that I've received several text messages, social media messages, emails, phone calls today that told me they were praying for us. And I just want to say thank you to all the folks in our community who are praying for us, to know that I genuinely appreciate that. And I want to say thank you.
Well said, Mr. Booth. I know we're dealing with technicals. I'll call him Mr. Thacker if he can, if he has
Yes, there's not much I can add to all the comments that you've made. So I second everything that all four of you said, and let's get going.
Absolutely, Mr. Thacker. And Dr. Pace.
I have nothing further to add at this time, sir.
Yes, and of course, there's going to be a lot of discussion as the presentation is being presented, and of course afterwards. So I do want to also explain that we're going to do things a little bit different with our public comments. There's been, obviously, this topic has generated a lot of interest, not just on this school board meeting, but also throughout the past weeks on what we've been dealing with. And every single comment that we receive is read and is considered by the school district and the board. What I am proposing, what I have decided to do is to continue with the agenda for the appointment and transfers. Then when we get to the main presentation of our back to school opening plans, I will go ahead and we will proceed with the district presentation. At the conclusion, I believe there is a video that was submitted as a public comment, and that video will be presented. I will then recess for the board to look at the last minute. There's a lot of last minute emails and messages. I want to give the board all the opportunity that it needs to receive this input from the community. And I want that input to come after the presentation, but before we begin to discuss the district plans. That way, we would already be appraised of what the community us to know. So that's how we are going to proceed. I think it's going to be a good balance of the community input being received by the school board and considered as they should. So with that, we'll go ahead and continue on to the agenda and pass it over to you, Dr. Pace, for your appointments and transfer.
Yes, Chairman Soto and members of the board, I'm excited tonight as we continue to try to make sure that we do start the school year with a full slate of our administrators across the school and across the district. I would like to recommend for your consideration as Executive Director of our Post-Secondary, Secondary, and Technical Education Department, Mr. Jeff Arnott. Jeff and I worked together at Point Siena High School. He's been an assistant principal here in this district. He also was the director of career and tech education in Monroe County, and he currently serves as a director for adult and community education for Brevard County Public Schools. He has his bachelor's degree in history from the University of Florida and a master's degree in educational leadership from the University of South Florida, and he's currently working on his doctorate degree in educational leadership at the University of Pennsylvania. I'm super excited to recommend Jeff to rejoin our team. I think he will be an asset to this department and to this community.
Thank you, Dr. Pace. Board, we would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Very well.
Second.
Very well. There's a motion to approve this appointment by Ms. Castillo, a second by Mr. Weisire. I would just pause and wait for hands and see if there's anyone that wants to, any board members that wants to have a question or wants to make a comment. Seeing there isn't, I'm going to call this appointment to a vote and ask all those in favor to please state aye. Aye.
Aye.
I did register 5 aye votes, therefore the vote passes 5-0. Next, Dr. Pace.
Yes, sir. One more tonight this evening. As you know, we recently appointed Will Hennessy to be the principal at East Lake, leaving a vacancy in the assistant principal role at Reedy Creek Elementary School. And tonight I'm pleased to bring forward for your consideration Dr. Angel Lopez. It just so happens that Angel and I also worked together at Point Siena High School. I hired him as a teacher many years ago. He is currently working as the math science coach at Point Siena Academy for Fine Arts. He has a variety of positions in higher education as well, including a researcher, technological consultant, educational director, adjunct professor, and a postdoctoral fellow at the University of Central Florida. He has his bachelor's degree in social work from Cleveland State University, a master's degree in exceptional student education from the University of Central Florida, as well as a master's degree in educational leadership from Stetson University. And he received his doctorate degree in exceptional student education from the University of Central Florida. So I'm pleased to recommend Mr. Lopez to join the team as AP at Reedy Creek Elementary School.
So moved.
Thank you, Dr.
Second.
Pace. There is a motion to approve this appointment by Mr. Ricky Booth and a second by Ms. Terry Castillo. I'm going to pause and wait to see if there's any hands for comments or questions, and seeing that there's none, I will therefore call this for a vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
Aye.
I did register 5 aye votes. Therefore, this appointment is approved with a vote of 5-0. Thank you, Dr. Pace.
Thank you, sir.
Now this brings us to the sole item on this special board meeting agenda, which is the superintendent's recommendation. And you have the floor. You and your team have the floor, Dr. Pace.
Thank you so much, Chairman Soto and members of the board, and certainly members of the community who have been providing incredible feedback for us as we've tried to look at what a roadmap to reopening for the 2020-2020 school year. We're also pleased tonight to have some special guests with us who I'll introduce in a few minutes, who will also have some guidance and expertise to share with you as a board. I wanted to start with just a general overview of what we've accomplished since the schools were closed after spring break. First of all, as a district, we distributed over 17,500 laptops and 1,200 hotspots. For a district that was not set up to be one-to-one, I'm certainly proud of this accomplishment. About 32% of our students needed assistance with the digital device or access to Wi-Fi. I'm very pleased also to say that we did have 94% engagement in our digital learning process, which is about what our average daily attendance is when we're in a traditional face-to-face environment. We know, however, that was different at different levels. At our elementary school level, it was a little higher, dropped off some in the high school, and then it was harder for our middle school students to engage in the digital learning world. But certainly our teachers and students and families just did an amazing job. You can see that we had over 1 million launches through the Teams platform. 700,000 focus launches, 795,000 launches of Pearson, which is our K-8 math curriculum, and then Office 365, 572,000 launches. So a lot of people were there. We also learned very much how important multiple means of communication would be to help our students and teachers and families be successful in this very quick transition to digital world. So we had over 63 million remind messages. I'm also very pleased to report that as we've been working over the course of the last month to have our students and families return those devices so that they could potentially be allocated back to our schools or distributed again if necessary, we're at a 78.5% return rate on loan devices and only about 2% damage rate, which is well under industry standard, as well under what many of our neighboring districts have encountered. So I'm super proud of our students and families for making sure that we get these devices back so we can clean them, image them, and get them back ready for use. We do know, however, that there were significant challenges during this period of time. Certainly everybody did the best that they could, but there was an additional stress that goes along with it. We know that throughout our community, access to digital learning devices and Wi-Fi is inconsistent and more challenging for some than others. We also heard from our community, our teachers, our students, and our parents who said that, managing all of this time management piece really was hard for parents trying to do their own work, for teachers trying to do their own work and support both their students and their own children. And we know that some students really are not independently motivated to engage in this piece. We also know that the limited personal interaction between teachers and peers contributed to some of the social and emotional stress that some of our families and students and teachers experienced. And then we're very concerned about the predicted learning loss, right now popularly called the COVID slide. In particular, the research that we're seeing shows that we predict that students may have lost up to 30% of learning gains over the course of the closures from March to May and then through the summertime, as well as 50% of learning gains in math. And this is an area of great concern for us because as a district, we've been working very, very hard to improve our outcomes in all achievement, but certainly math has been an area of focus for us, as you all know, board members. So we looked again at John Hattie's research from Visible Learning about what's the effect size? In other words, what's the impact on learning for different forms of instruction? Distance education, according to John Hattie's book in 2017, has an impact of 0.13. So that's about a month of learning above and beyond what's going on. Instead, teacher efficacy, teachers believing in themselves and their ability to positively influence student learning and student outcomes, has an effect size of 1.57. That's almost a year and a half of additional learning when our teachers are engaged with that relationship with kids and making a difference and believing in the difference that they can make. When teachers can predict student achievement and teach to help kids continue to raise that, the effect size is 1.33. And then, of course, for teacher credibility, in other words, kids and parents and everybody believing in what their teachers can do for them, there's an effect size of 0.9. So almost an additional year of learning that can be predicted as a result of some of these things. So we know that teachers matter. We also know that relationships matter. We were fortunate that when we had to transition to digital learning in March, our teachers and students had already been working together for 3/4 of the school year. They already knew each other individually, personally. They could identify student needs and really reach out and try to respond and adapt our digital learning process to help meet those needs. It concerns me greatly about opening a school year with digital learning only, because we would be missing that opportunity for teachers and students to build those relationships and get to know each other on a better basis beyond just data and a face on a screen. We've also looked at some research that came out of the American Medical Association 2020, Sharfstein and Morphew, that says there are major divides by race, ethnicity, geography, and economic class in access to home computers and high-speed internet. They also said the COVID slide will likely be greatest among those students who are already at educational and social risk. For that reason, These gentlemen say that reopening schools this fall is an urgent national priority. Just yesterday, the American Academy of Pediatrics released similar guidance. Board members, you know that we have been really strongly focused on equity, all means all, helping all of our children to be successful and to have what they need to advance their learning and catch up and close those achievement gaps. The COVID slide concerns me greatly for potential to widen achievement gaps, something that none of us want. And Frederick Douglass, years ago, said it best in terms of the value and importance of education, in terms of helping people to achieve their fullest potential and truly be free to choose and make great decisions for their lives in the future. He said, without education, he lives within the narrow, dark, and grimy walls of ignorance. Education, on the other hand, means emancipation. It means light and liberty. It means uplifting of the soul of man into the glorious light of truth, the light only by which men can be free. We want all of our students, every child, every chance, every day, to have exactly what they need to be successful and move on to great things in their future as the responsible and productive citizens that our mission talks about. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you. Thank you to so many teachers, parents, students, school leaders, and community members for your support and engagement throughout this process. We also want to, as you as board members shared in your public comments, thank our community for their engagement with us as we've been working through a back to school task force and what a back to school plan should look like. At the beginning of the summer, we sent out a parent survey asking about their preferences for how schools should resume classes at the start of the school year. Keep in mind that responses represent a snapshot in time, and as the pandemic continues to work its course through our community and through our country, we know that people's thoughts and minds change, but we wanted to get a baseline of where we were. We had over 27,000 parents respond, which is a super response rate. And out of that, 44.5% of our parents said that they would prefer to return to school with face-to-face instruction. 29% indicated a preference for digital learning, 20% indicated a preference for a blended model, and 6% indicated that they would prefer to enroll their student in a full-time virtual program through our own Osceola Virtual School. We did a similar survey with our teaching staff to ask their preference for what type of instruction they would be comfortable with at the start of the school. And the survey results were very, very similar. Face-to-face instruction was 45%, digital learning was 30%, and a blended model was chosen 25% of the time, according to this survey from about 3 weeks ago. So why even consider face-to-face instruction in a pandemic, particularly recently as the data in our community has shown a significant increase over time, indicating that there is now cause for community spread? Why not just go back to digital learning? Well, first of all, that's not the preference of our parents or our teachers at this time. Also, we remain optimistic that we are still a month out from the start of school, and we hope that over the next couple of weeks, we will be able to get this situation under control as a community. I reminded all of our principals and site leaders yesterday that we have an obligation as the largest employer in the community to really model and continue to emphasize safety guidelines for social distancing and covering your face and washing hands so that we can get the pandemic under control. Recognizing, however, that even today's plan could possibly be changed drastically in the next couple of weeks if things continue in the current trend. However, we know that we need to be able to have a plan in order to move forward. Coming back to school is not just about the social activities, the face-to-face interaction, but it's really about that learning purpose. Our concerns about the COVID slide and what it may do to equity and to widen gaps that we've been working hard to try to close. We truly believe in all means all, and we believe that face-to-face instruction is an important element of helping us to achieve that goal. We also do believe that there are precautions that we could put into place that would limit exposure and promote health and safety of students and staff. From the very beginning of this conversation, board members, you tasked us with making sure that we kept safety as our first priority in planning. But we certainly want to remember that we have to balance safety with that need to continue learning and accelerate learning as we think about a return to school. And then finally, I wanted to remind everybody that even the CDC guidance to schools cautions that recommendations and safeguards should be applied to the extent that it is feasible, practical, acceptable, and tailored to the needs of our community. We can't just say we're going to be able to do everything when it's not operationally even possible or feasible. This is a sample of some of the parent comments that we received from our survey. Some were about learning. It's time to get back to school. I want all my kids in school with some precautions. The learning from home is much less than if they had a dedicated teacher and classes. They also recognize that kids need emotional support. Students need to go back to school. Most parents don't have the time or the resources to help kids at home because of their own work schedules. Also, this idea of social needs. Students crave interaction. This is about more than just books. Students need to physically interact with their teachers and their friends. And then the mental health component is certainly a concern. These kids need school. Their mental health was greatly affected during the last few months, and they need normalcy. I think all of us feel like we need normalcy, but we have to decide as a community and as a group what that will look like in a safe environment. So we convened our back to school task force, and we've had some wonderful, wonderful work come out of this group. We have 2 infectious disease physicians from Nemours Children's Hospital who have been tremendous thought partners throughout this process. We've had parents on our task force representing elementary, middle, and high school concerns. We also had school principals recommending or representing elementary, middle, and high school concerns. We had a registered nurse from our district staff who was a leader on this team with Mr. Phelps, our deputy superintendent. We engaged with our coordinator for athletics, our supervisor of health services, our coordinator for safety and security, transportation, school nutrition services, as well as 2 members, our current president and the incoming president from the Osceola County Education Association, to make sure that we had voices represented at the table who could really speak to the needs and the concerns and potentially the fears of all of these groups. So we asked these questions. What is most important to you when we reopen schools? What do you feel is an absolute non-negotiable for a successful reopening? And from a medical perspective, what factors should we be considering when we return to school? And then also, of course, we looked at what do you want me to know about your family's experience throughout this pandemic? So I mentioned to you that we had some wonderful medical thought partners engaged in this conversation. Our local supervisor of the Department of Health, Bianca McCluskey, has reviewed our plan, and I get daily updates from her office regarding what's happening in our community with COVID and what steps we should be taking to ensure that we have safety for our staff members who are working, as well as staff and students who may be coming back in the next couple of weeks. But at this time, I'd also like to go ahead and introduce to you our 2 medical experts, our infectious disease specialists from Nemours. Dr. Kenneth Alexander is the Division Chief of Infectious Disease at Nemours Children's Hospital. He's a pediatric infectious diseases expert and researcher. He joined Nemours in October of 2014 from the University of Chicago, where he was Chief of Pediatric Infectious Diseases and a Professor of Pediatrics at the Pritzker School of Medicine. Dr. Alexander earned his medical degree and Doctor of Philosophy at the University of Washington in Seattle. He completed a fellowship in pediatric infectious diseases at Duke University Medical Center in Durham, North Carolina, and a research fellowship in the Department of Virology at Burroughs Wellcome Company in Research Triangle Park, North Carolina. His research has been published in more than 30 peer-reviewed journals and numerous book chapters. Dr. Alexander is certified in pediatric infectious diseases by the American Board of Pediatrics. In addition, we've been blessed to work with Dr. Adriana Cadilla, who serves as a physician with the infectious disease team at Nemours Children's Hospital. Prior to joining Nemours in December of 2015, Dr. Cadilla was the Pediatric Clerkship Assistant Director for Florida International University and Nicholas Children's Hospital. She was also an urgent care physician in Miami and a pediatric infectious disease physician at Lee Memorial Hospital in Fort Myers. Dr. Cadilla was also a pediatric hospitalist at Little Company of Mary Hospital in Chicago and at Chris Everett Children's Hospital in Fort Lauderdale. Dr. Cadilla earned her medical degree at Ponce Health Science University in Puerto Rico before completing a residency in pediatrics at Nicholas Children's Hospital, formerly Miami's Children's Hospital. She continued her training with a fellowship in pediatric infectious diseases at the University of Chicago. She is certified by the American Board of Pediatrics with subspecialty certification in pediatric infectious diseases, and she is fluent in both English and Spanish. So at this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Alexander and Dr. Cadillo to share their thoughts about the work of the task force and how they've contributed to our back to school plan.
Very well. Good afternoon. I'd like to convey my greetings for both me and for Dr. Cadillo to the school board. I'd like to begin with some thanks. Mr. Phelps has been an excellent partner in this whole process. Mr. Phelps is a very scientifically driven character who has over and over again asked, what is the best evidence? What is the best practice? And he has turned frequently not only to us, but to organizations like the CDC and the World Health Organization. I would like to congratulate Dr. Pace both on the high engagement that's happened with the school district during these difficult times. Working with Dr. Pace, I've found her very pragmatic and her focus on safety is intense. Chairman Soto, I'm very pleased to meet you virtually. I realize your background for all this is altogether fitting, with both being a corpsman in days gone by and now working as an attorney. These are complicated times. And I'd certainly like to thank Deborah Williams, who has sort of shepherded us through all this complex process. Again, I'd like to introduce Dr. Cadillo, who is my colleague at Nemours Children's Hospital. And she's going to be especially important to have with us in the discussion today. She has particular expertise in the area of infection prevention and personal protective equipment. So she'll be able to ask many of our questions about masks, about gloves, about hand washing, and these kinds of things. Equally important, Dr. Cadillo is a mother of 2 young children, one of which is in the Orange County schools. And I think Dr. Cadillo has learned firsthand the challenges of educating her children at home. So I think she'll give you some real world perspective. As we began our discussions with Dr. Pace and with Dr. Phelps, we articulated what we thought our guiding principles should be together, realizing that we are on uncharted territory here. But there are a number of things that we do know for certain. Despite all the uncertainty, there are things that we know for sure. First of all, it's been articulated from the top down, excuse me, safety is our #1 priority. So everything we look at here, we're going to look at through the lens of safety. Secondly, I think as Dr. Pace has made very clear, school is important. School's important for many reasons, not just education, but for socialization, and it's especially important for the safety of our children. Third, COVID-19 is going to be a factor in our lives for years to come. This is not going to be a flash in the pan. This is going to bring about permanent change in our society, how we think about disease, how we interact with each other. And so we have to come up with permanent solutions. That being said, this is a new thing to us, and so it's a learning process. We are all keenly aware that parents need to work, and that an important function of school is not only that it allows children to learn, but it allows parents to provide for their families. So taken together, school is going to look different. It's not going to be the school that we had last year opening at this time. The good news is this: children as a group do well with COVID infection. If you look at all the experience in the state of Florida, all the pediatric cases of COVID-19, there have only been 2 fatalities. And both of those have been in older adolescents with serious comorbidities, patients who are set up to have bad disease. In our own hospital, we've had less than a handful of children with COVID-19 admitted to the hospital. All of them have gone home. All of them have done well. So our duty, in many ways, while it's natural as parents and as educators to focus on children, in fact, the people that have the greatest risk around COVID-19 infection is not the children in the school. It's the adults who serve them in the school. Simply put, I am much more concerned about the diabetic lunch lady than I am concerned about the third grader. So we want to make sure that as we make our plans, we are serving children, but we are protecting adults. Similarly, we want to keep in our consideration protection of adults at home. Many of us have multi-generational families. And so it's important as we make our decisions about sending children to school, that we're not only making decisions for the children themselves, but we are protecting parents, grandparents, aunts, and uncles, and everyone else in our home. And to do all that effectively, trust matters. I think the most important commodity the school board can build and nurture is trust in the schools. Now, this is hard because there's a lot of noise out there. There's a lot of voices with contradictory information. There are people saying that this isn't real. There are people acting like this is Armageddon, and everything in between. So trust and perceptions matter. And taking that with the fact that here we are in a world where we can control what we can control, but we can't control everything. And so there are going to be things that are going to happen out of our control, things that we cannot foresee. So our goal is to control what we can control and then be responsive to those things that come up. We will mitigate risk where we can, but we realize that we cannot eliminate risk entirely. And so this is where, again, trust becomes important. Trust in the adults in the school, trust that we will get smarter, trust that we can be flexible, and trust that science will continue to help us lead the way and that we're going to come up with ways to get through this. So I'll stop at this point and turn it back to Dr. Pace, and we can begin to address questions and specifics in the school board plan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexander and Dr. Cordelia. Again, we appreciate your work with our team. So as you've heard, we used both input and guidance from the medical community to come up with our Ready, Set, Start Smart reopening plans. Across all of our schools, learning acceleration, including closing the achievement gaps, safety, and equity are top priorities, and the key to our success will be our flexibility to adapt to changing conditions. We fully understand that the plan today is the plan for today. We fully hope that we'll be able to implement it with fidelity for August the 10th, but we will respond to changing conditions as necessary. As you could see from the responses to our parent and staff surveys, we felt like we had an obligation to provide some choice, some options for parents, with the understanding that option one, face-to-face instruction at a nice assigned school, is what we believe is ideal and best for high qualities of learning for all students. So we're prepared to offer three options: face-to-face instruction at a student's assigned school, digital instruction with the assigned school, and then option three, which is always available, our full-time virtual learning K-12 through Osceola Virtual School. And we'll talk a little bit about each of those options in the next few slides. So we're going to start with what option one would look like. How would we be able to have a smart restart that includes specific elements that will help us all feel safe, both students and staff members? One of the guiding principles is this concept of screening and understanding that if you have symptoms of COVID-19 or you're sick at all, please do not come to school or to work. So we're going to ask our parents before students come to school to check temperatures, assess for symptoms. If child has a fever of 100.4 or higher, if they have a cough, shortness of breath, loss of taste or smell, or if he or she has been in direct contact with someone who has tested positive for COVID-19, they must stay home, and a parent should contact their medical provider. We will be working with our attendance policies to make sure that we're able to treat kids fairly, and students who have to transition or stay home for a period of time could be bumped into digital learning or sent home with paper packets so that learning doesn't have to stop. Quarantines are still in place for any student or staff member who travels internationally or goes on a cruise ship. Currently cruise ships are not operating, but it's important to remember that once they start up again, unless the quarantine guidelines are lifted, anyone who chooses to go would be expected to self-quarantine for 14 days. Because our schools have multiple entry points, we didn't feel like we could check temperatures for every child and every staff member every day. So we'll be checking temperature checks at different entry points at each day so that all students and staff members have their temperatures checked at least once a week. For example, on Monday, we might check all of the bus riders. On Tuesday, we might check all of the car riders. On Wednesday, we might be at the Walker Gate with our thermometers. Each school has been provided 5 touchless thermometers to use for these purposes. In addition, we'll be providing our clinical staff the clear face shields in order to make sure that if we do have a child who comes to school ill or a staff member who's exhibiting symptoms, we can isolate them quickly and everybody would continue to be protected. Buses are one of the most problematic operational components of coming back to school safely and social distancing. We know that. So we're going to really ask our students, if you're going to be waiting for the bus, it's important to practice social distancing. Stick those arms out, stay 6 feet apart, and wear your face covering. Students will also be asked to use hand sanitizer as they board the bus, and on the bus, they will need to wear face coverings and sit no more than 2 to a seat. We've been working with Dr. Alexander and Dr. Cadilia. We simply cannot afford to transport 12 or 14 kids on any of our buses and make things work. We also can't find 600 new buses and 600 new drivers between now and the beginning of school. But we feel like that with these precautions, we can work with our routes to have 2 kids per seat, and the face covering is going to be just an essential part of this effort. In fact, what you'll see throughout our plan is that when social distancing is limited or simply not practical to have a full 6 feet apart, that is when face coverings are going to be very, very, very important. Car riders would be dropped off in the car rider area, and we would not, unfortunately, be able to allow parents to walk students into the classroom or into the cafeteria this year. We will have staff ready to greet our students and get them where they need to be safely, but limit access to the campus for anyone other than students and designated staff members. Our walkers and bikers would also enter at a designated entry point, and once you're coming to school, let's put that face covering on. While at school, students would be asked to wear a face covering, pick up a grab-and-go breakfast, and report to their classroom upon arrival, as opposed to gathering in open settings in large groups. It is the district's intention to provide every student and every staff member with 5 of the cloth washable masks, so that that's not a worry for anyone. If someone's waiting at the bus stop that first day or 2 and doesn't have a mask, the bus drivers will be provided a small box of the disposable ones just to help students get on the bus, have their mask, and then make it to school safely, where we can replace it with their own washable masks. The washable masks have already been prepackaged in groups of 5, so we can hand every child a bag, every staff member a bag of masks, and it'll be up to them to wash them and have them for continued use throughout the year, or at least until the situation returns. One of the other areas that's problematic are our water fountains. We know that sometimes students, particularly our younger students, tend to put their face very, very close to the water fountain when they're going to get a drink. So we would encourage all of our students to bring a water bottle to school and limit use of the water fountain to refill those water bottles. It's very much like what our athletes are doing this summer for the summer conditioning programs. When students are moving about the classroom, they would also need to wear their face covering and practice social distancing. We plan to spend some time in that first day or 2 really helping everybody to assess what the size would be and what that looks like, particularly our youngest learners. For example, our kindergarten students, we would like to try to bring in part at a time so that we could have a small group on Monday, a small group on Tuesday, a small group on Wednesday, in order to learn the protocols and better understand, get that relationship started with their students. We would also ask our VPK to 5 fifth grade students, in other words, our elementary school students, and our students in our K-8 schools who are in VPK to grade 5 to remain basically in their classroom most of the day. For example, we would ask our special area teachers, when possible, to travel to them as opposed to them going to a specific spot. And say, for example, I'm the math and science teacher and Mr. Phelps is the reading and social studies teacher, then we would have the teachers move places and not the students. That way the student is at their assigned desk with their own designated supplies throughout the day and reducing the sharing. I also wanted to talk about when students are in the classroom, and we know that wearing a mask all day is really, really difficult. It's uncomfortable, it gets tiring, and everybody's going to want to take it off at some point or time. So we're designing safe practices where if I'm working independently at my desk, or the teacher is providing whole group instruction and I'm sitting at my desk, then I could remove my face covering. However, if the teacher's calling me to work at their desk or at a small table or with a small group of peers, for example, we say turn around and talk with your neighbor about this particular piece of text or this particular math problem, then they would need to put their mask back on when they're having that direct face-to-face conversation. We will ask students to use their own headphones at our computer stations, use hand sanitizer before and after they complete their computer tasks. And desks, tables, and computer stations will be spaced out across the classroom 3 to 4 feet apart and diagonally arranged, facing all in one direction in order to prevent as much face-to-face contact and exchange as possible, even in the classroom. We've already practiced at our elementary schools, and we've done an elementary school, a middle, and a high school to see what it would like. Can we physically move the desks around? We will be asking teachers to take any extra items, for example, reading corners or couches that they might have brought into the classroom will most likely need to be removed in order to provide spacing for our desks and tables and computers to accommodate that additional distance between students, but it is viable. It can be done without losing student stations, particularly at the elementary level. While at school, we'll also be asking students, of course, to wash their hands frequently or use hand sanitizer throughout the day. We have, over the course of the last month, been installing hand sanitizer stations across our campuses and district offices. We've also ordered a substantial amount of hand sanitizer so that we can provide it for each and every class, and we'll make sure that we have plenty of paper towels and soap to go around to make sure that we have those opportunities to keep students safe as best we can. When students are changing classes, or for example, going to a special area class, that would again be where we would ask students to wear their masks, practice social distancing, and we're designing signs that would be one directional in our hallways and stairways, so that again, we're not having that cross exchange. Students in music, band, strings, and chorus will need to practice social distancing, going to avoid sharing of instruments, and wear face masks when singing or chanting in particular. We know that it's been particularly problematic when some choirs have met before we knew all that we know now about COVID-19 and how it spread so quickly. In the cafeteria, again, where 6-foot distancing is not simply practical at all of our tables, students would be asked to wear their face covering and use hand sanitizer when waiting in line for food. At those places, we would have designated standing locations that would mark off the 6 feet distance. When they get to their table, they can certainly take off their mask for eating and drinking, but we would ask them to put it back on before they get up to leave the cafeteria to go outside or to go back to their classroom. Cafeteria tables will be separated and all facing in one direction so that, again, we avoid that face-to-face piece. We do believe that we will need to have limited access to our campuses at the beginning of the school year. Unfortunately, that will be limited to students and staff members only. We will look for other ways to engage our volunteers who've been so active and so supportive of our school community over the last few years. But we want to make sure that we can keep our adults and students as safe as we can, and that means limiting that access and accidental contact and potential spread. We will have a designated isolation area in the event that a child or a staff member comes to school or develops symptoms throughout the day, so that our students and nurses can be protected as best they can until we can get them back on their way home and off to campus or to see a medical provider. I will tell everyone that tonight we will be posting the entire back to school plan after we have school board input, feedback, and certainly then blessing for this particular piece. So that basically sums up what we've designed as the primary safety protocols for back to school. There are more comprehensive plans laid out in our actual plan document that will be accessible to parents and students. We're also designing communication tools, including video, dial-out system, a specific designated site on our website so that parents and community members and staff members can access that information over the course of the next couple of weeks. So the second option, digital learning with our assigned school, is something that about 1/3 of our students and staff members expressed interest in during our survey. It's important to remember that this would be new and improved digital learning, not the digital learning light that we were forced to transition to very, very quickly back in March. where teachers had designated office hours for 3 hours and students were only engaged in the curriculum about 2.5 to 3 hours. Some instruction was live, some instruction was not. That simply is not conducive to full-time learning for a long period of time, particularly as we start the year. So we would provide additional guidelines that would promote secure, effective, and consistent use of instructional time and platform features that will ease navigation for both students and parents to content, lessons, announcements, and assignments. One of the requests that I had from parents after about the second week of our digital learning experience in March was, can we get a consistent place where all assignments are posted or all tasks are submitted, or all lessons are delivered via video? At that point in time, teachers and students had already worked out arrangements that were kind of working for them. But over the course of that experience, we've had our tech folks engaged in what are the best practices for setting up a digital learning environment. And that's something that we would be providing training for our teachers before the beginning of the school year if they're assigned to a digital learning experience. Teachers would be providing instruction on the digital platform with either Teams or Canvas, depending on what they've used familiarly, but they would this time follow the district's instructional day, so that if I would be teaching in the reading block at an elementary school from 8:30 to 10 o'clock, my reading block in the digital world would also be from 8:30 to 10 o'clock. We would expect students to participate in these live daily lessons so that as a student, I would be in the reading block with my peers from 8:30 to 10 o'clock, but some may be face-to-face with the classroom teacher. Others may be doing it digitally from home using a device that would make that particular piece work. We would ask this time for our teachers who are assigned the digital world or who choose to do digital to record their lessons so that students and parents could come back to them at a later time if they need additional assistance or need to review what the new learning task was. But again, it would be a more following a traditional school schedule. So teachers would provide virtual office hours and opportunities for small group instruction throughout the day, for example, perhaps outside of their typical planning period, because they would still need that. We would continue to provide communication channels to school counselors, social workers, and psychologists to help support the social emotional learning of our students, even if they're in the digital world. And we would provide on-demand access to both training content, troubleshooting, and technology support for the digital environment. This option would allow students to have continuity of the student experience. It would allow them to have some campus connections and community, and it would provide for an easy transition back to face-to-face instruction when parents are comfortable sending their child back to school. It also provides a viable option as a recovery tool for students who may become ill or would need to quarantine during the school year. We believe this option is important to offer to our parents and students and staff members, but I do need to caution the board members that there is the potential that through this option, our students wouldn't earn full FTE. But we do believe that we'll get additional guidance and some consideration from the state for that particular element of this aspect of learning. The third option is a program that we've continued to offer and will continue to offer, our Osceola Virtual School. It is a fully accredited public district school serving students in grades K through 12. Students must have access to a computer and internet access to enroll. Full-time students are expected to participate in courses on a daily basis. However, they can work more flexibly and more independently on non-traditional school hours, including evenings and weekends. I will say that when taking online classes, students who have achieved success make a greater effort to stay organized. They create a schedule. They tend to be better at managing their own time, and they need to work towards staying on pace with the assignments. There's no difference in the curriculum or in teacher certification with Osceola Virtual School. Osceola Virtual School is not easier than traditional school in any way, shape, or form. In fact, many parents and students find it more challenging. The teachers are Osceola School District employees. They teach the Florida state standards, just like our other teachers do. Classes are written at grade level, and they do require an average of 1 to 2 hours of focused study on a daily basis to complete a course within the traditional semester time frame. Osceola Virtual School does engage students in real-life projects, requiring the use of critical thinking, problem solving, and students do have the ability to apply the knowledge that they have acquired. But it's heavily reliant on strong literacy skills because it's very much text dependent. So that is something for parents and students to consider. In addition to the Back to School group, we have also had a Back to Learning task force going on, recognizing the need to accelerate learning when we come back. Their guiding principle is this: every child will receive high impact, equitable grade level curriculum and instruction without bias from someone who believes that they can achieve every chance, every day. We realize that the most influential factor for an SDOC student is our teachers. As a district, we will be supporting our teachers in accelerating learning for all through effective ongoing professional learning, relevant timely data and support and analysis, as well as engagement and involvement in the decision making. Our success criteria would be this: we'd like to see all of our learners experience 1.5 years of growth from their own personal starting point. We'll be assessing where kids are with a new tool called NWEA using our CARES Act dollars. We're required by the state to do a baseline assessment at the beginning of the year to really measure and assess how much of a COVID loss we're experiencing. And this is our tool that will be allowed to do it. It will also be allow us to do student growth metrics throughout the year, which will help us stay on track and prioritize assistance to students who may need more support. We've also redesigned our curriculum unit plans. They will have prioritized skills and standards, continue to have learning and language goals. There will also be embedded social and emotional learning activities, a continued focus on read, write, talk, and solve, because we know that those are the strategies that have the greatest impact on learning. But we are also including within the CUPs multimedia resources. So whether or not teachers are teaching in the face-to-face instructional world or the digital learning world, the CUPs would be consistent and be utilized across those particular platforms. And obviously, we'll be diagnosing our unfinished learning with our research and evaluation and assessment reports. So we'll have a starting point for scaffolds to provide Tier 1 instruction, as well as Tier 2 and Tier 3 support from the very first day of school this year. We fully want to monitor student progress on grade appropriate assignments. While there has been a COVID slide, we know that we can't go back and teach last year's work to this year's students. So for example, while our third graders this year will have missed some of the key standards that they were going to acquire in that last quarter of the year in second grade, by prioritizing essential standards, we'll know what are the skills that we must supplement and add to so that they can begin working on third grade work, but with scaffolds and accommodations to meet the needs of all of our students, including our English language learners, our students who are receiving support through exceptional student education, and students with the 504 plan. Tools and timelines and actions will be defined at the district and school stock takes with engagement from other factors during our PLCs and at the individual teacher level. We'll be analyzing formative data and supporting teachers in doing so to inform instruction, and then looking to identify and address our SEL needs using the Panorama survey data that we started just last year. So as we move forward, reopening would be measured by success across the following dimensions. Health and safety continues to be priority 1. Access and equity, however, and student outcomes are equally important. We want to make sure that we're providing the right learning tools and options for all of our students to achieve success. We know that as adults, we've experienced stress throughout this pandemic experience, and so have our students, and we want to provide support for social and emotional learning. This will require professional development and support, and we'll be looking at economic indicators as well. While our governor has signed our budget just yesterday for the upcoming school year, currently we know that funding appears to be whole at the beginning of the school year, although a lot of things were cut. Education funding remains strong, but we know that there are specific dollars allocated to specific purposes. So it's going to be important that we're mindful of what happens over the next couple of months with the economy and what might potentially impact our budget come January, after we look at what enrollment is and could face a significant cut. But we will be prepared to pivot to digital learning as needed for one child, a class of children, a school of children, or perhaps all children in the district at some point if necessary. So a few questions and answers that have come out over the last couple of days and weeks from our stakeholders in the community. Why this big emphasis on facial coverings for students and for staff? This is really recommended when social distancing is not feasible or practical, as indicated in the CDC guideline. For example, those places in the buses, the cafeterias, the common spaces as people are walking through hallways, walking around the classroom. Because we know that spread occurs most through air droplets as individuals talk, sneeze, cough, or cheer. We know that facial coverings protect you, and more importantly, they also protect those around you. So it's really about safety for yourself as well as safety for others. And so we're committed to providing 5 washable facial coverings for our students and our staff members for a safe return to school. Some may ask, well, why are we even talking about coming back to school for face-to-face instruction when just last week you announced that we had to cancel graduations? Graduations were canceled after Department of Health's advisory came out on a Sunday afternoon, going back to advising groups no larger than 50 in large gatherings, particularly indoor gatherings. In talking with our local Department of Health and also with Dr. Alexander and Dr. Cadilia, contact tracing becomes such an important element anytime someone comes down with COVID-19. And when we talk about a graduation ceremony where we had plans for students to be 6 feet apart, for adults to be limited to 4 tickets who would be stationed and sat 4 seats apart, if one person in that group comes down with COVID-19, you potentially have over 2,000 people to try to contact trace, and it could spread absolutely like wildfire. Some districts in the state and across the country are looking at staggered schedules. For example, Group A comes on Mondays and Wednesdays, and Group B comes on Tuesdays and Thursdays. In school, everybody does digital learning on Fridays for more cleaning, or some come in the morning, some come in the afternoon. This has really been something that we've really struggled with for several different reasons. Number one, we know that many of our students in our community count on us for breakfast and lunch, that daily meal that helps to provide sustenance and allow their family to meet other basic needs. We also know that many of our parents are preparing to return to work. And if kids don't have a place to go, parents have a hard time finding childcare so that they can work and help to support their family. We've also talked about the negative impact that digital learning potentially has for students, particularly for our most challenged students who need our support and need our help the most. And then finally, transportation challenges for these types of schedules really make it almost cost prohibitive to try something like that with our current environment. So what would we do if a student or staff member tests positive for COVID? Well, obviously, the first thing is for that person to self-quarantine for 14 days before returning to school or to work. We will work with our parents and students to transition one or more individuals to digital learning, provide paper packets so that learning doesn't stop. But we will need to continue to help remind people that while we encourage regular and consistent attendance, perfect attendance is not the goal this year. The goal is that we keep people well by staying home when we're sick. We would be working immediately with our Department of Health on contact tracing, and then we would be communicating to others who have been in direct contact with that person as appropriate. So what happens next? This is really what we'll be communicating once we have a final plan with our board's input and approval, what we would want parents to do over the next couple of weeks. Really research the options. Go back, listen to our recording, make sure that we are advising others about why digital learning or why distance learning or why virtual school or face-to-face instruction really is the best choice for your family. Then we need to know what you're thinking. We will have a form online later tonight to tell us which of the back-to-school options you'll select for each of your children. So if I have 3 children, I will need to complete this option choice for each of those children so that their school can be contacted and begin making arrangements for the right schedule and the right assignment for that particular child. If you decide that face-to-face instruction is the best for your child and your family, then at the same time that you tell us about that option, we would ask that you continue online to register to reserve a seat on the bus, so that we could make sure that we're planning appropriately for that two children per seat, and making sure that we have the drivers and the routes well designed before the beginning of the school. And then finally, if you choose that Osceola Virtual School is your choice, then we've given you a number, 407-870-1445, where you can begin the registration process. Mr. Hodges, the president of Osceola Virtual School, is scheduling weekly orientation sessions, virtual weekly orientation sessions for parents and students who are interested in that particular feature. So the Osceola School District, we believe, is ready and set to start smart. We believe that we have comprehensive plans in place to keep everyone safe and healthy as we welcome our teachers and students back to school and back to learning with the regular calendar on Monday, August the 10th. We remain committed to serving every child, every chance, every day. Some have asked why not delay the start of school until after Labor Day. This doesn't work well for our staff members, quite frankly, who have a first paycheck coming when school begins on August the 15th. And we certainly know that more people out of work is not good for our community. And the longer schools are not open, the more parents struggle to be able to return to their jobs. For our economic recovery to get back in gear, we know that school plays a very, very important role. And so with that, Chairman Soto, I will turn it back to you and back to the board for your questions, your comments, your feedback, and then ask for action to approve or amend the plans that we've presented tonight.
Thank you, Dr. Pace.
And I just would remind you, Chairman Soto, that Dr. Alexander and Dr. Cadilla are also available to answer specific questions related to the medical aspect of this plan.
Yes, and I appreciate that they are available to continue in our discussion and provide the input and insights that we're going to require. Board at this time is this was a very exhaustive presentation. Thank you, Dr. Pace. I believe that the details in it are designed so that if we do have any questions after everything that we've heard and seen so far, it would be something that has not just been addressed. So at this time, I do want to keep our meetings are public for a reason, and that is that we want to hear from our community in before we make decisions on any matter. And in this particular matter, there was a lot of public comments. So I believe that there was one video that was submitted. I'm going to ask at this point for that video to be presented. And after that, I want to give the board opportunity to look at the comments that have been submitted. Now, in the interest of maintaining the meeting going and making efficient use of time, after the video, I will simply ask for a 10-minute recess, and I will convene the board back in 10 minutes and ask if they need additional time. And the reason that 10 minutes may suffice for some of us is because, as I just pointed out, this was a very exhaustive and very detailed presentation by Dr. Pace that took into account, so much input from so many different sources. And so a lot of the concerns and questions that may be presented to the board from these public comments may have already been addressed. But if there is anything that hasn't, then when we return, we'll be able to present those questions to the district and to Dr. Pace and maybe discuss it amongst yourselves with input from our medical doctors that are present as well in order to go ahead and resolve those. So I will go ahead and ask at this time that the video be presented. Ruben, is that something that you can proceed with?
You're going to see a video pop up on the bottom right hand corner in just a second.
Thank you.
Should we continue? Can we?
Yes, click on the continue button to play the video.
Would others that are connected to other people will be able to see this video as well?
Everyone that have received the same message to click the continue button to play the video.
Thank you. Thank you, Ruben. And board, I'm gonna go. I will call a brief recess. It is 6:41. At 6:51, I will call this meeting back to order. We'll pause now. I'm going to briefly reconvene this meeting. I just going to ask around on the board if they need another 5 minutes. I'll start with Ms. Castillo. Do you need any more time, ma'am?
Yes, I apologize. I am still reading the comments.
No need
Just
to
5 more
apologize.
minutes, please. Thank you.
No need to apologize. There's a lot of comments. Mr. Weissier also need the time. I need the time. Um, so we'll go ahead and I believe for the benefit of the other board members, we'll save for a recess and we'll reconvene at 6:57. Thank you for
Oh,
your patience.
I'm good, Mr. Soto, but okay.
Yes, I understand, Mr. Booth. We'll reconvene at 8:57.
Oh, I hope not. How about 6:57?
I stand corrected, 6:57. Thank you. We're calling this school board meeting back to order. I believe that at this time I'm going around to make sure that the board has had ample opportunity to read the vast comments that were submitted on this topic, and then we will begin our discussion. Ms. Castillo, do you need any more time?
I do not. Thank you.
Very well. Mr. Weiser, we're good. I'm good as well. Mr. Booth, are you there? Very well. I see you're back. Mr. Thacker,
I'm good.
10-4, and Dr. Pace.
Ready to go, sir?
All right. So if let me just begin by making up a few comments and observations. First, again, this was a very detailed and exhaustive back to school plan with a lot of input from many sources. What I wanted to point out is that to the community is that a lot of the information that the school district and the board has considered is public information. This is an issue that no one is hiding the ball. Our scientific community, our health departments are learning more about the effects of COVID on the human body every day, and that information is being shared. But what we're also learning as well is how our social systems, our economic systems, our community systems have to adapt and are coping. We're developing techniques and processes so that we could continue a functioning society. And what the school district has presented right now is the culmination of all of that data, all of that understanding, and most importantly, the understanding of our very own community on the part of the district with our task force and the school board to pretty much construct this back to school plan. Just recently, and I'm almost done, and I will pass it. You will not hear from me again probably because I've read everything. I've read the comments. I through the school superintendent, Dr. Pace, brought to my attention an article that I was able to look up through Positively Osceola. Actually had it there for anyone to read, and it was a recommendation from the American Academy of Pediatrics, and it was the article that Dr. Pace referenced, which had a lot of information. This information, it's valuable and it needs to be considered. But I also read an article that explained in very scientific detail about a mutation that happened with the COVID virus on one of its proteins, one of its amino acids, that actually made this virus a lot more infectious. So I want to pass it over to Dr. Alexander. I don't know if he's aware of that article, if you are, but basically we're still learning about this, and there's always a realistic and there's a reasonable possibility that the plan that we're right now considering to open the school may yet receive another um, other conditions and changes, because these things are we're just learning more and more every day as it goes on. So with that, I'll go ahead and I'll yield the floor to Mr. Alexander to explain about the nature of this virus and whether we should be at least prepared to make more changes before August 10th comes around.
So thank you very much. You're absolutely spot on. I think that this is a continually evolving process, and over again, we keep hearing the word unprecedented. We've all faced many unprecedented things in our lifetime. In fact, even now as we're seeing protests in the streets, these are in some ways unprecedented. But we will learn and we will develop. I think there's a couple of important points that we do have to keep in mind. Again, while these mutations are occurring, and it's a cause for concern, so far what we're not seeing is an increase in the virulence or the ability of the virus to actually kill people. Children, again, do very, very well. So we can expect these changes to occur. But it's for the very reasons you mentioned that we have to continue to be light on our feet. I think it's also important that we maintain again, a good appearance that we are responding. And in fact, I was meeting with Dr. Kadia on the phone during the break, and she expressed a deep desire to continue our commitment with the Osceola schools. This is an ongoing dialogue. The other thing that I would ask is, I think you've got an exemplary model here, and that as this is made available, I think you'll find other districts will be picking up what you're doing and following your lead. So I think there's much to be proud of here.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. And as I promised, that was really what I wanted to highlight in this part of the discussion. At this point, I'm going to call on the school board members. I do have Mr. Thacker who has a question. He'll be followed by Ms. Castillo and then Mr. Booth. So, Mr. Thacker, you do have the floor.
Okay, just a very quick comment from reading all the statements. The plan that the superintendent or team have put together does offer flexibility. And when I read the 150 or so comments, many of those are addressed in that flexibility. Not a big surprise. There's lots of absolutes. Do not want my kids in school. Do want my kids in school. And I believe we're giving some of those opportunities. The question that I have, and it may be, excuse me, it may be for Dr. Alexander, I'm not sure. But there were a couple of questions of what would happen in a classroom if one student tests positive. My question really is, I know, and I don't know anything about the medical field, and nor do I want to pretend to, but I do understand there are tests that people can take that give results within an hour as opposed to 14 days. Is it possible for the school district to obtain those tests? And again, I don't know anything. And is it possible for our school nursing staff or to be able to administer those tests? I understand, every time you hear about the White House, they give those tests every day, a couple times a day, and nobody's got it. So if it's good enough there, I certainly would think it would be good enough for our teachers particularly and our students. Is this a possibility? I'm sure there's a cost with it, and I know we don't have much money, but we have reserves that are purely for emergencies, and we are, whether you can afford it or not, I don't know. We are in an emergency situation, I believe. So can somebody address that, or does anybody know that? If nobody knows,
let me begin with that. And actually, Dr. Kadia, I'll ask you to comment on kind of the current thinking in pediatrics about how efficiently do children transmit infection.
Am I?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. So right now, as you probably know, there's not too much out there about how kids transmit the virus, because we've primarily focused on the population that has been affected greatly, which is the older population. So in order to know a lot more about what's going on, we're going to have to continue to do studies and understand how things happen in children. But the data that we do have appears to show that children are not able to transmit the virus as readily as adults do. Why that's the case, there's multiple theories out there, not one clear thought, but we have been able to note that research papers coming out do demonstrate, for instance, whenever you find a child that's positive, you can usually trace a positive adult that they live with. So usually the child is not the one that is causing the infection and spreading it. It's usually spread from somebody else. Now, we're learning a lot. I'm sure it does have a lot to do with the child's individual characteristics. And as far as the schools, right, so your high schooler is not the same as your kindergartner. And so there is a lot of things that we do need to take into account. And that's why I think that the presentation that was done today, it was done beautifully. It does give a lot of options and opportunity for changes to occur as we get more information that we need to make some further recommendations.
So thank you, Dr. Kadia. I think that's an important point. To put it another way, if you look in pediatric care of children with COVID-19, it appears that transmission of infection from children to adults is extraordinarily rare in the healthcare setting. And this is because we're wearing masks, and we distance socially. Well, I think if the district is able to carry out its masking and distancing plan, I think transmission from children to adults and probably between children is going to be a very uncommon event. Now, to Mr. Thacker's question about testing, this has really been one of the most difficult facets of the epidemic. There are three kinds of tests that are available. The first kind of testing is molecular testing, where we actually test for the virus RNA. This is typically a test which has taken 3 to 4 days to turn around, but there are commercially available kits now where the testing turns around in about an hour's time. These tests are limited in availability, and this is probably what you're seeing in the White House on an unlimited budget in a group of people that are very anxious. The second kind of testing is antibody testing. Antibodies tell you what happened 2 weeks ago. So if somebody has a positive antibody, that tells you what happened to them in the past. There are now studies being done on a third class of testing, what's referred to as antigen testing. Now, instead of looking for the viral RNA, they're actually looking for viral proteins. The jury is still out on this kind of testing. We'll learn more about this in the next few weeks. This is the least expensive, but is less sensitive than the molecular testing. I think the important part is that testing is going to remain scarce. There's a huge demand for testing. And I think this is a time when your most important partner is going to be the Florida Department of Health in Osceola County. And so I would certainly have some very serious discussions with our health department partners, because for them, keeping the schools open and understanding the role of the school in disease transmission is going to be a very important thing. So these are the partners I would seek out.
Thank you. That's very helpful. I think based on those comments, Dr. Pace, I know you're meeting very, very regular, probably every day with the health department staff, but I think we need to get, and I'm sure this is on the table because I know y'all are smart and think about all this stuff, but we've got to find a way, I believe, for this to get back on track, especially with teachers where there's one person in the classroom that tests positive, because we know that's going to happen. We've got to 14 days. I know somebody that took 3 weeks to get a response to a test. That's totally unacceptable, I think, for this to work. And everything you've got, I think, is great. I think it's perfect. If we can figure out a way, I mean, we're the biggest employer in Osceola County. It's extremely important that we have 8,000 people going to work. It's extremely important that we have 70,000 kids learning in the manner that they choose to learn in, given the options you're providing. But we've got to be able, we know there will be cases, we know there will be exposures. We got to find a way to test as absolutely fast and get, more importantly, get the results fast. So with that, I don't have any other comments, I don't think, on any of the presentations.
I will certainly follow up, Mr. Thacker, with Bianca from the Department of Health, and also with Kenneth at our Employee Health Center to see if they have some access as well. Thank you.
Okay. All right. I'm going to now call on Ms. Castillo. Ms. Castillo, you do have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Thacker. Actually, now I had 8 questions. I only have 7 because that was one of mine. Dr. Pace and team, I really appreciate your expertise in education. It shows with your presentation and your work in this particular process. And I just hope that you understand that that is evident to us, and that is why we trust you. And I also want to thank Dr. Alexander, Dr. Kadia, and Ms. McClunsky for helping us through this as well with their expertise and their knowledge. Also, this is a very intricate, difficult choice that we have to make. We have an incredible plan ahead of us, and I appreciate that. And you have answered a lot of questions. I do have some additional questions. None of these are material. I think that our plan is solid, and even based, like Mr. Thacker said, on the comments that a lot of our community members, including students, made, it is apparent that the flexibility is going to be it's going to be something that is helpful for our community, because that is exactly what they're asking for. So in that sense, I do think that this is a good plan. There are still some things that I have questions about, but I just want you to understand nothing is material at this point. So my first question is going to be with regards to the flexibility in changing the plans. I did see that there is a July 15th deadline for parents and caretakers to choose which path they want to take for the next year. However, my question is, what if in the middle of the year, for example, they decide that the plan that they chose is not working for them? Is there the flexibility for them to change paths at that point?
Osceola Virtual School is less limited in terms of when people can make transition from the program, either in or out of the program. So once students have begun in Osceola Virtual School, or after about the first month of the school year, it would be impractical and not possible for them to bounce in or out of Osceola Virtual School and still continue earning credits and moving forward in their curriculum. However, the reason behind offering the second option, the digital learning plan that would be attached to the student's school, is that it would have that flexibility. We know that we have parents continually enrolling in our schools. We know that people are moving in, moving out. What we're hoping is by July the 15th, we'll have a solid number from which we can build our plans, because this is going to require a lot of adjustments. You know, our principals have been just amazing throughout this whole process. Our teachers have been as well. But while we have master schedules done today, we know that they're going to end up looking differently. But we hope that by July the 15th, we'll at least have enough of an indication if the options that are being chosen mirror what the survey said a couple of weeks ago, then we can make our plans according to that and still give people the option of moving from one side to the other throughout the school year.
Thank you. That brings me to my next question, specifically regarding the survey and Osceola Virtual and capacity. One of the things that I'm learning is that surveys are useful in most cases, but sometimes they can be a little bit inflexible and not give us accurate information. So I know that right now we have 45% of parents and even teachers who want face-to-face learning, but that may change even after today as we have a really large audience who is taking a look at our plans. So my question is with regarding, well, it's a two-part question. First, with regard to the second option, which is the hybrid learning, I guess is what we can call it, where a student is attending their assigned school, but they are attending it virtually. One of the things that I saw that was a little bit concerning was that there is a thought that we may not obtain full FTE for that specific student. So my question is, can we maybe use Osceola Virtual as an option for that? Did I see that correctly, or am I wrong about that?
That is something that under the current guidelines would be problematic. However, we have received information that it's being brought to the highest level at the Department of Education, the state board, as well as the governor's office. And we believe that there will be some consideration for that. But I want to be transparent up front that while our parents and staff members are really wanting that type of option and we want to provide it, there is some risk involved. It is potentially, though, something that we could mitigate with CARES Act dollars if we had to.
Okay, thank you. And then regarding the capacity for Osceola Virtual, if after this, if after we bring out our plans or people have more knowledge of the different options, because I'm assuming not every parent answered the survey, and Osceola Virtual becomes more of a, I guess, hot ticket, does Osceola Virtual have the capacity to take, more students at that? I mean, I don't know what number that would be, but I'm concerned about the capacity with Osceola Virtual and kind of that process.
Right. That's another reason why we're really asking parents to try to make some decisions between now and July the 15th, because we know that if more of our parents choose Osceola Virtual School, then we may be reducing allocations at some of our current schools and potentially offering teachers the opportunity to shift into an Osceola Virtual School instructional model. Keep in mind that teachers at Osceola Virtual School are district teachers. They're on the same salary schedule. They follow the same calendar, all of those types of things. It's just delivery in a different way. It does require some more specialized training, however, than even just a transition to digital learning does. But Mr. Hodges is prepared during those last 2 weeks of July to ramp up with more staff if we have to. It wouldn't be new allocations because we won't be getting more money. It would be moving allocations from schools that are showing a reduction in enrollment due to more of their students wanting to do OVS.
Got it. Thank you. That actually brings me to my next question, which is regarding development over the summer. I'm sure that you've already thought about this, so this is really just a rhetorical question. What would you have in mind to kind of help teachers transition into this new world that they will be navigating come August 10th?
As I believe I've mentioned to you, board members, we have reached agreement with both OCEA, our teachers and support staff union, as well as Teamsters, for an extra day added to the calendar as a one-time option in order to provide safety training and also protocols for those who want to go on to distance learning. So it will be July the 30th. We anticipate that a lot of that training will be done virtually. However, it'll be done on site in small groups and will allow groups then, for example, to set up classrooms and move desks around after they've had their virtual training. But we are already planning for that type of professional development. Our green shirt team from IT will be coming in the next couple of weeks to develop some additional videos around the best practices that we've identified in the digital learning world, so that the same type of training, but more thought out this time around, because we've had time to plan, will be offered to teachers in that situation before school returns in August.
Perfect. Thank you. With regards to the buses, you mentioned that there was going to be 2 students per bus. And right now, is it 3? How are we doing that
Most
today?
of our routes now are stationed at 3 per route. Mr. Creech has estimated about 15 additional routes might be needed, which is an additional cost. However, we do have the buses, and we believe that we could find drivers because there has been more interest in joining our bus driver pool. The primary concern with our bus drivers is age and health. That is our our population that tend to be some more of them over 65 than our instructional staff. Overall, only about 4% of our entire employee group is over 65. So I was relieved to find that out, but we do know that there's some health conditions there. So we are starting up a face-to-face summer camp program, and on a much smaller scale, July the 6th, with the governor's recovery money. We'll be bringing some of our bus drivers in, reaching out to those and getting their commitments for, yes, we're ready to come back to work. Obviously, they would be provided face masks and hand sanitizer and that extra layer of protection for them, as well as for the students on the bus. We also anticipate that between the students and parents who choose to do Osceola virtual school, or who choose to do digital learning, or whose parents say, you know what, I really want face-to-face, but I'm more comfortable taking my kids to school as opposed to putting them on the bus, that we can manage that aspect of our plan.
Perfect. One of the questions that I had, and a few of the comments that we received on for public comment actually reflected this concern that I have as well, is with regards to compliance. I know that we don't like to use that word. I mean, I do, but I don't know if other people do. When it comes to the face masks and making sure that the children are not using water fountains and they bring waters. We know that there has been some mixed feelings about whether or not face masks even work, or whether the data is correct, or what have you. How are we going to communicate emphatically, right? This isn't an ask, right? I know that you use the word ask because that, you know, that's just the way you talk, but this isn't really an ask. You're required to wear a mask when you are on campus. How are we going to communicate that? Are we going to write that into our rules? Are we going to have some kind of social contract when school begins? I'm trying to wrap my head around that, not just for myself, but there was quite a few parents and others who were concerned about the compliance aspect of, with the face mask, with wearing the face masks.
If I may comment on this one, the statements that masks don't work are political statements, not scientific statements.
Of course.
There is compelling evidence that masks make a difference, both in modeling studies and in research studies. So what I would say, as the district is making its decisions about masking, is be confident that you are in the right.
Thank you, Dr. Alexander. I appreciate your insight and your input there, and your expertise in this matter. You know, a lot of it, Ms. Castillo, is going to be communication. We brought forward our plan to the board tonight so that we could start a communication plan tonight as soon as this meeting is over, if, you know, the board decides that this is the plan that you want to adopt. so that we could help our parents and students make sure that they understand why this is important and what we're going to expect and how we're going to help make that possible. We're also working on a tremendous amount of signage. We're going to employ our 3D printers to help with some stickers. One of our architectural partners, Little Architects, has designed some of the, you've seen the stand here, 6 feet apart, wash your hands, that kind of stuff. They've done a great job and they gave us those designs to use for free. So we're going to be able to print those with our high school 3D printers to save on cost, but they'll be distributed to all of the schools as constant reminders of the fact that this is our expectation. Now, we do know that we have some of our special needs students for whom wearing that face mask all the time is just really not practical. Most of the time, those students are in classes that are smaller, where social distancing is much easier to manage than it is in some of our other classes. We also know that with our staff members wearing masks, they're protected. And as Dr. Alexander mentioned, we really worry most about protecting the adults because the spread from kids is not as much. But it's going to be a continuous education piece. I have said to our principals, I don't want to be sending kids home and suspending them for not wearing a mask. Okay, we want to use our relationship skills, use our persuasion skills to get kids in compliance. There's a lot of value to that. I've seen some things over the last couple of days, particularly as it relates to college football. Mr. Booth will like this. I think I saw today something about Gators wear masks hashtag or something like that. And I'm sure my Auburn Tigers have something very similar to that. The bottom line is if you want to be in school and you want to have that social interaction with your peers, you want to have sports or band or chorus or drama or any of those other things that motivate you as a middle or high school student, then you're going to have to wear a mask. That's kind of the way that works. So that's our current plan.
Great. And my last question, I promise, team, with regards to the way that you have redesigned the classrooms, it sounds, you're basically social distancing the desks and whatnot. Did you redesign the classrooms based on 45% capacity? And what if we have more students no, so full capacity? Oh, yes. Perfect. Great.
In our elementary schools, we can get the desks 3 to 4 feet apart, which as Dr. Alexander and Dr. Cadilia shared with you, our youngest learners typically don't have the same power of spread that our other learners do. In a high school or a middle school classroom, we could potentially lose 5 to 6 desks, but we anticipate that with the digital learning option and the virtual school option, we'll be able to accommodate that as best we can. And if not, we're going to be relying heavily then in those situations on the facial coverings.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Ms. Castillo.
Where's their chairman at?
Mr. Booth, you got the floor.
Oh, is it my turn? First, I just want to make sure everybody knows this is unsweet tea. Second, I know we didn't talk about it a lot, but I'd like to bring up the point because Dr. Pace touched on it. I was so extremely disappointed. Excuse me, extremely disappointed that the graduations had to be. And I hate we used the word cancel because we didn't really cancel them. We just modified them greatly. And so I was extremely disappointed that happened for our 2020 seniors. But I think Dr. Pace, the governor's decision, the Florida Department of Health's decision, and your decision together was kind of validated when we saw what happened in Bradford County just days later. So while I am extremely disappointed, I hope that the families and those seniors know that was certainly the right move. As I've been contemplating this decision and talking to many community members, I was shared an article, and I know I have the quote right because I wrote it down. I may not have the organization right. The doctors can probably correct me. From the American Association of Pediatrics says that schools are fundamental to child and adolescent development and well-being, and that we should open them back up. And so certainly I've been a proponent of trying to figure out a way that we can get schools open back up. I just to make a statement here, if folks are watching, and I know folks will hear what we've said, please make sure you understand this is a fluid situation and that it will continue to change as the virus changes, as the infection rate changes, the death rate changes, whatever changes have to be made. Understand that we will make those changes at the school district because there's many unknowns, and you've heard the doctors comment on that. Second, I want to make sure that that folks know who are watching out there, and that we have to have community buy-in to make this work. If you are not supporting, if you are not helping your teacher, your principal of your child's school by making your child understand that wearing a mask is extremely important, especially for the health and safety of your teachers, and then for you potentially taking that back home to your parents or grandparents. So we've got to have that buy-in, and I want to make sure. Now on to my questions, Mr. Soto, if you don't mind. Dr. Pace, how are we going to validate the temperature check each day? You said hopefully we'd run through every student at every school in a 1-week period. How is that going to be validated? Do we have kind of a running list? Johnny was checked, Jane was checked. We got to check Jimmy and Timmy today. Like, how does that work?
Yes, that is something that we would be doing. And we had originally talked about doing primarily the self-screening aspect for staff, but with Dr. Alexander and Dr. Cadilla's guidance and also Ms. McCluskey, we probably will need to check staff members every day. We have been, thanks to our partner Harris Rosen, able to install and pilot over these last couple of days, a walkthrough scanner at 4 of our sites. There's one here now at the district office that as folks are coming in for the day, they lift up their wrist and it tells us what their temperature is. Mine was 97.2 today, by the way, because I'm not coming in my back door in order to make sure that we model that temperature screening. But we'll be working toward a system in order to validate and keep track of that so that we are hitting that at least once per week with every child. But again, a lot of it goes back to parents seeing themselves as such important community partners in this. As desperate as I know we all have been about getting to work some days, popping that kid with some baby Motrin and sending them on to school is really not good in this kind of a situation. We're going to have to count on each other to respect the fact that if you're sick, you need to stay home. We'll work with you about attendance. We'll work with our staff about leave options, but that's a major responsibility that we all have and we'll have to share to ever get this under control in our community, Mr. Booth.
Okay, no, I understand it. I went the other day for an interview and I went through a scanner, like an iPad type scanner to get my temperature checked. And I know I've had my temperature checked at several restaurants across the state with the laser on my forehead or whatever it is. I'm like Mr. Thacker. I'm not pretending. I'm not going to pretend to be a doctor. So I guess Ms. Castillo asked this, but just to kind of clarify further for me, we are going to have enough virtual teachers. And I guess to include in that question before you answer would be, is this some of our high risk employees? Are we giving them the options to be the new virtual teachers? Or they kind of have a first serve, or how are we doing that?
I've asked our principals to look back to the work that we did in the spring. Who were those teachers who were just truly rock stars in the blended environment? Then to consider the health needs of their staff members. We will have communication going out to employees later tonight and again tomorrow. If the board decides to adopt this plan that says if this is something that you're concerned about, something that you'd like to try, email your principal. We're going to ask our principals and site supervisors to have some voluntary WebExes over the next couple of weeks to kind of really talk about this in more detail, as specifically as it relates to people's roles. But what we envision is that all teachers would still report to work on August the 10th, their normal 7.5-hour day. But if I'm the 3rd grade teacher teaching Mary, and Mary wants digital, and I might have 18 kids digital, I could still be in my classroom without access or without exposure to other children. I could just do social distancing with my colleagues, but still participate in EPLCs. But to keep that same recurring schedule, that's what we mean when we talk about even digital learning is not going to be digital learning light like we did in the spring. It's got to be back to our regular structured day with virtual and video lessons, but presented in a similar fashion as you would as if you had the 18 or 25 children sitting in front of you.
Yep. Thank you, Dr. Pay. A couple more, if you don't mind, Mr. Soto. Just real briefly, dual enrollment, that's going to be a partnership with Valencia, and that's going to continue?
That will continue, exactly. They are still working through which of their classes will be online, which of their classes will be face-to-face, but it is not negatively impacted, as well as our dual enrollment at OTEC will continue as well.
I'm going to take this one. I want to discuss all three just very briefly. The last one, let's discuss a little bit more, but the first two briefly. Recess, PE, and then sports. Can we comment on those, especially in elementary recess? I mean, I know we have the state law now about recess and how that will be handled. So could we comment a little bit about recess, PE, and then also I'd like to touch on sports, especially fall sports.
Right. The good news about recess and PE is that they're typically outside. We'll be working with our PE resource teacher, Matt, to work with the teachers on what are some alternative activities that don't involve the sharing as much of equipment and those types of things that can be done with kids spread out. Obviously, they would not be wearing masks if they're running and playing, but we are going to have to do some teaching those first couple of days about what that 6 feet looks like in order to avoid touching and spreading of each other while they're playing. I've seen some really creative things done with hula hoops to kind of give kids a sense of what that space looks like and feels like, or even the pool noodles or beach noodles that a lot of us have that provide that sense of distance. So it's going to be a lot of education, a lot of training for what you can and can't do in those types of activities. Regarding like playground equipment, we don't have a tremendous concern about that because of the sun and the fact that the virus does not appear to live for a long time in that kind of a warm, hot environment with the sun shining. PE, similar activities. When it comes to sports, we have started our summer conditioning programs, and we're preparing to start drills. We have some guidelines in place that all of our student athletes and coaches are following, including not using the locker rooms right now, bringing their own water bottles, wearing masks. For example, if you're in the weight room and you're the spotter, you wear your mask because you're going to be right over somebody as they lift that weight. So just trying to put as much safety in place. We're following a plan very similar to what's being implemented across the state. As of right now, they say that we'll play on a regular schedule. That is still yet to be determined. Obviously, for spectators, those types of events, we would expect to have social distancing. We can mark seats off. We may have to have limited capacity. At all of our events, and facial coverings, again, may be a common expectation for those type of events. But as it stands right now, we are planning to move forward with things as scheduled, just waiting for some additional guidance from the FHSAA.
And board, just so you know, I comment on, and thank you, Dr. Pace, just so you know, I searched the word sports out as I was reading through our the public comment. It appeared in almost 10% of the comments we received tonight, and it actually has been the second most numerous question that I have received is, what about the fall sports? Are we going to play football? And just let me say, I'm the father of two high school athletes, and they have been already participating in some of their high school activities. How the virus would survive out day, I barely survive outside all day right now. So hopefully that's doing it. One more and then a comment, if you don't mind, Mr. Soto. And actually on this one, I don't know if we need discussion on this. It may be something that we need to discuss and come back with a different plan, is enforcement of not only mask wearing or face covering wearing, and probable infection. So I guess basically repeat offenders, if we're going to have in place a policy that says you have to wear a mask, and we get constant folks saying, young people saying, no, I'm not going to do it. No. And repeatedly told, I'm not asking for an answer today. I'm just talking about, I think we need to come up with a clear policy, how we're going to handle that. And that needs to be put out to the public.
Your student code of conduct really already covers that if you look at the definition of insubordination, but certainly that is something that we would educate people on.
But we're dealing with masks. And then I guess the second will be probable infection. I mean, if a student walks in the door, mom blows out of the car rider line because she gave the kid the 2 Motrin and needed to get to work, but the kid obviously has some sort of infection, comes in with a fever. How are we going to, and I'm not asking for an answer again, how are we going to deal with, I know we're going to isolate that student.
Yes.
Certainly we're probably, best case, what we need to happen is that student then to be removed from campus.
Correct.
And so in a timely manner. So I want to make sure that those things are taken into account. And again, I don't want to waste a lot of time tonight discussing those, but I think that's something we should bring back and discuss and further with maybe a plan that you present. And I'll finish, Mr. Soto, and thank you for the time. And first of all, thank you to Dr. Alexander. Thank you to Dr. Cadilla for participating. I do actually believe when I saw this presented and I spoke with Dr. Pace, I firmly believe that her leadership and the leadership of this school board is going to be a model for districts. I think you're going to see these slides stolen and used on a lot of other district school board meetings around the state, maybe and around the country. So thank you guys for your help. I know, and we're kind of coming to bat early in the lineup here because I know a lot of districts have not had their meetings. I know some have, but we're coming up to bat pretty early, and I think that speaks volume with the quality of leadership we have at the district and on this board. Quick comment again. Sorry, I missed this one up top. Absolutely would love to research getting the testing machines. I know they're in high demand, or at least working with, I know St. Cloud Hospital has one because I happen to be on the board, but I'm Osceola Regional and Advent Health. I'm sure they all have testing machines. If we could have some sort of agreement with them, or Rosen agreement with them to have a testing, maybe we're transporting, 10 or 20 tests from every school each day of probable cases over to a central location or to a locations around the county. I would 100% agree with and support getting that done. And then just to finish, and I'll say this, I said it in the last meeting, and I'm going to say it again. Ultimately, board, setting aside all the great work that Dr. Pace has done and all the great work that our task force has done, ultimately, it's our decision here tonight that we're the 5 people that have to say to the community that, yes, this is the way we are going to move forward. And again, I want to say thank you to the folks that have done that. I am in support of this program or this policy or this way to go forward and open back to school. Understanding again, it's fluid. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I will make a motion to adopt this going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Booth.
Second.
I will second that.
All right, so Mr. Weissire will second, and Mr. Weissire, you have the floor. I believe it's your turn next to make your comments or questions.
Sure. Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Board. Thank you, Superintendent, for your thorough work and presentation. You did an exceptional job in walking through this, as well as our medical professionals that have not only been such incredible partners for us throughout this process, but also present and interactive with us this evening to outline their viewpoints as professionals, as well as to be responsive to the questions, ideas, or concerns that have been raised by board members. I want to also compliment the board. You guys have done. I've sat and listened to your questions, your responses, and your thought process this evening, and I want to say that I appreciate the work that you've done tonight to ask a lot of the questions that would have been on many of our minds, and even some that maybe we wouldn't have thought of individually, but that's the value of us working collectively. For the community, I want you to know that the staff has done an exceptional job of laying out multiple options and multiple documents that help answer questions that everyone's going to have. And I'm holding now, which will be available to everybody, the 3 sets: one that deals with questions for parents and students, one that is the principal's edition, and one that is the teacher edition. And the reason I mention that is it shows the level of intentionality that has gone into developing this work product and this plan. And further, it doesn't happen in a vacuum, as been mentioned multiple times. There's not only a committee that's been involved in this work, to the superintendent. Someone may want to mute their line, by the way. Thank you. Not only has there been a committee involved in this work all along, representing a cross section of our community, but the individual board members have had conversations with our superintendent at their leisure regarding this. And Dr. Pace, I want to thank you for the time that you and I spent together talking through this. And again, your intentionality of kind of talking through and answering some of the questions that I had before we sat here this evening. The other part goes back to something that Mr. Thacker said at the very beginning, which is that if you think about the concerns, the questions, and the comments from our community, most of those have been answered. Maybe not all, but most of those have been answered in providing the various choices. If you want your student in a traditional school setting and you're willing to comply, as Mr. Booth just talked about, you're willing to comply with the expectations that have been laid out on our plan, then that option is afforded to you. If you prefer virtual, that's afforded to you. If you prefer distance, that's afforded to you. And in the spirit that this board has always operated in, is that it's empowering parents to make choices as to what they believe is in the best interest of their individual child as they know best. Board, I seconded the motion on this. I fully speak in support of moving forward with this. I would submit to the board, our superintendent, our teachers and staff, and our community that this is the plan that we put in place as we sit here today. We're a large organization, as the superintendent mentioned, that plays a very vital role in our community. And students and parents and community members are looking forward to being able to get back to school and get back to work, and yet still do it in ways that provide for safety, security, and awareness of the risks that still exist in the midst of COVID-19. And I say that because what I think is going to need to be understood by all as well is that we continue to adapt and evolve as we work through this. And so I am confident that we have put together the best plan possible that we can in the time and space that we find ourselves in. And much like we put in place a very effective plan regarding graduations, but as new data and new information was provided to us and new recommendations came from the medical professionals, we made a decision to adapt and evolve in that regard as well. And so the same thing I believe will hold true here. One thing that I know is absolutely true is there's an unwavering commitment to doing the right thing by this board, by our staff, by our superintendent, and I stand behind each of the subsets that I've just mentioned. Board, I speak in favor of this. Superintendent, I thank you and the many partners that have worked to help bring this to its current form, and I believe we've done good work. And I want to end on this. Mr. Booth, I think, is the one who just made these comments. School districts, as you guys know, that's part of what I've spent a lot of my time over the last few years working in school districts around the state, will be looking to our district for leadership. And just today we rolled out on the statewide level a post-pandemic plan that is being distributed to school boards across the state. And this board has been proactive in getting ahead of some of that work and developing such a plan as this. And so I'm proud of the work we're doing, and we stand ready to implement these processes and then stand ready to support our peers across the state as needed. Thank you.
Very well. So before I call it to the vote, I'm just going to make my final comments, and that is that I want to reiterate, make clear that this process would not have been complete without the input from the members of our community, and I'm talking about parents, I'm talking about every resident, everyone who lives in Osceola County, and that whose life is impacted by a well-functioning school district, which is the case in every community in this great nation. Osceola County School District touches the lives of so many, and not just economically, but we are that beacon of hope that our function is to shape the future of our nation, and that's never lost on us. To that point, everything that we've discussed, these are all public records. The comments that were made for the school board to consider are part of the record. The presentation that Dr. Pace provided and all of its details, it's going to be publicly available to anyone who wants to download that information. The plans that Mr. Weissire, he did present, the document is going to be available to everyone. And again, it just wouldn't happen if we did not hear from you. So let's continue. The board and the district will continue to be transparent. And we ask that every member in our community continue to provide us with information, constructive or any type of criticism. We stress kindness in our students and in our staff and everyone that works in the school district. We ask for kindness from everyone in this very difficult times. I know it could be difficult. Emotions do run high sometimes, but we want to listen to you, and we are going to continue to welcome the flow of information from what is concerning and what's important to you, and we will continue to consider that, as Mr. Weissire and the other board members understand, as we adopt and we evolve in handling, what the future is going to be of our public school system with COVID-19. And so with that, I will go ahead and close discussion since I don't see anything else, and I'm going to call a vote on the school district's recommendation that we adopt this back to school plan. I have a motion to approve by Mr. Booth. There is a second to approve by Mr. Weissire. I will take a vote. All those in favor, please state aye.
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 And I did register 5 aye votes. And so the recommendation and adoption of the back to school plan is approved with a vote of 5-0. It has been a very long meeting, and before and it had to be. There's so many people to thank, so much great input from so many members. I will go ahead and just give a brief pause to check for hands if there's anything else that needs to be said. And with Dr. Pace, of course, it is most appropriate that you do have the last word, our superintendent.
I want to thank the board for the support. I want to thank the community, obviously, for your engagement and participation in this process, and obviously thank our medical providers again for being such valuable partners as we've moved forward. I would like to request from the board to consider an executive session for the purposes of discussing bargaining, unions, negotiations with our labor groups after the signing of the state budget by the governor and the signing of the teacher salary allocation dollar categorical. So that would be following our next meeting on July the 14th, specifically related to labor issues.
I believe that's fine. Any board member wants to comment on that? Okay, let's make it happen in the agenda. Thank you, Dr. Pace. Thanks for everyone who participated and attended this meeting. I wish you all be well and have a good night. This
Thank
meeting
you.
is hereby adjourned.